Hey everyone, happy Saturday. I hope the lighting's okay, but it's such a beautiful day here in Ohio. I just couldn't help but try to do this Facebook Live outside here at my house. I don't know if you can kind of see our pond. So I'm a few minutes early too, but I was ready. So I thought, well, let's just do it and get it recorded. And then all you revolutionaries can have a listen back as you have time because you're so super busy. So let me just set the stage for what this Facebook Live is all about. So this past week, we, in real time, unless you're watching this, down the road a bit, we launched Podcast 36, which is all about how to get rid of behavior charts. Well, it's maybe not how to get rid of them. It's a call to action to get rid of them. Talking about what do I mean by behavior charts, because lots of times people say, yeah, but what about if I do this, is that better? Is that okay? So we clarified what we're talking about. We clarified sort of the reasons that we do them in the first place, which we'll come back to, and then sort of that call to action to stop using them. So then as I was thinking, okay, why do we still have them? Why are they still so prevalent? If we're so committed to, and so many of us are like, yeah, let's burn them, let's bag them, let's get rid of them. Why do we still use them? And then I always worry about a practice where I take a hard kind of line in the sand with that I'm kind of doing to adult professionals what that I'm complaining they're doing to children, which is publicly shaming them. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, if anyone, walks by somebody's classroom and they see somebody using a behavior chart or some sort of visual or verbal way they're drawing attention to kids' behaviors, now are we going to call them out and say that, they're not doing the right thing? And so then I get all this shark music. And so I thought, okay, maybe I need to be clear about what my goal is. So I called my good friend Jennifer Lopez. If you don't know Jennifer, many of you will meet her soon. She is co-leading the Effortless Coach with me, which we can talk about another time. But the Effortless Coach is all about how itinerants, community teachers and professionals, how you can coach with compassion. Even if you don't consider yourself a coach, it's really for you as itinerants. But anyway, I said, okay, Jen, help me out. I want to do this Facebook Live and I want to help people understand there's these different scenarios, right? So I could be a parent and I could notice that my child's teacher is using behavior charts. So do I run in the room and rip them down? What do I do? You could be a new teacher and you could be watching this Facebook Live, or you could be listening to a podcast and you're like, okay, I get why it's not maybe the best practice, but everybody around me is using them. Maybe even my district requires that I use them. So, hey Trish, and so then it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do for those newbies that are out there going, should I burn it or should I use it? And then I thought, well, what about if you're brave revolutionary and you're like, yeah, I'm going to burn it. I'm going to rip it off the wall. I'm going to do away with my behavior charts. And then behaviors, it's October and it's not great in there. And oh my gosh, should I bring them back? And then maybe you are a coach. Maybe you're a supervisor. Maybe you're there supporting these other amazing adults. And you're like, how do I help them see that behavior charts aren't the way we want to go, but I don't want to ruin the relationship that I have with them. I want them to know that I do know that they're amazing and I do know that they're trying their best and that there's a different way. So there's all these scenarios that I said, Jennifer, help me. And she's like, okay, let's step back for a minute. She goes, we can't just expect people to rip them off the walls immediately. And I was like, wait. Yes, we can. That's why I did the podcast. She's like, let's think about this for a minute. Is that really what we want? Is that we want people to just instantly see the light and move forward and rip them off the wall, stop using them, and everything will be just fine. I was like, that's probably not going to happen. And maybe that's not really my goal. And she said, and are you clear about why they're using them? Are you clear that they're not working? I'm like, well, of course they're not working. They're publicly shaming children. They're terrible. They can't work. And she's like, let's talk about this a little bit more, Kristie. So in talking to her all these scenarios about, a parent, and she is a parent, and she said, my kids' teachers have used them, and she had lots of questions for me, and I was getting a little bit calmer, but still it's the green zone. Jen, we got to preserve the green zone. We got to help kids stay in the green zone no matter what. And when we use these behavior charts, in my opinion, oftentimes what we're doing is we're pushing kids into the red or the blue. If you don't know what those zones are, stay tuned for podcast 37. We'll talk all about it. I'll also put in the show notes several things about the green zone as a window of tolerance or for optimal learning. The red zone is when we're hyper aroused, and the blue zone is when we're hypo aroused, which is very much tied to this feeling of shame or confusion. And so I was like, no, we need to help children stay in the green zone so that we can co-regulate with them, so we can teach them the skills that we want them to be displaying. She's like, all right. She keeps asking me all of these questions. And so then I said, okay, maybe I need to reframe my goal. My goal for podcast 36 about 3 strikes you're out is certainly not to make people humans, adults, right? Adult professionals, my revolutionaries. I don't want you to go into the red or the blue zone after listening to it. For you that are coaching and supporting other adults, I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, I've got to go over the weekend and go in all these classrooms and get those behavior charts off the walls. I mean, in the sense that you notice that you, it's not helping, but you also notice that we've got to walk carefully and be really clear about what our goal is. And do we hear our own shark music? So am I going to be approaching this adult with a place of compassion if I'm all amped up and if I'm ready, torch in hand, ready to be like, no, this is not okay. So this was like, how do I stop for a minute and ready myself? So whether I'm the parent, the new teacher, the veteran teacher that was part of the revolution, or a coach who's really saying, yep, I know this isn't best practice. I want to see a change. How do we start this? So we start with our mindset. Of course, this is never an easy answer. So just like with children, we have to approach this with compassion over compliance. So my goal was comply with my directions that I put into podcast 36. I'm very clear. I repeated it several times. Take them off. Stop using them. 3 strikes, you're out. Let's go. What else is there to discuss? So Jennifer, shaped that a little bit and said, all right, get clear on what your goal is. And so is your goal truly for people to see that this is a bad practice? And I was like, well, no, not really. Like, they don't need to. In fact, maybe I don't want them to see it as a bad practice, because then they might feel bad about themselves. And now the adult is in the red or the blue and unable to maybe even be open to my other ideas. So no, I just kind of want them to stop using it. And she said, well, tell me again, there are reasons they're using them. I'm like, yeah, I talked about them in my podcast. There's all kinds of reasons. She goes, well, might there be other reasons that people are using them? I'm like, well, probably. And she's, and do you know all of those reasons? And I'm like, well, no. So she said, okay, to get to a change, we need to have the goal of understanding. And I was like, but I still want them to stop doing that. She goes, right, but you don't want to publicly shame them, either in front of other people, colleagues, parents for sure. You don't want to break that relationship that you have with them, all that trust that you've built. I'm like, okay. So she said the way to get to change is through inquiry. Barb Avila, you guys know Barb, she talks about curiosity. Parker Palmer, if I channel him, he would say turn to wonder. And I'm like, this sounds like it's going to take a lot longer than me walking in the classroom and ripping them off the wall. She's like, yeah, because your goal is to find a practice that keeps kids in the green zone. Do you really care what that practice is? Is it so important that everybody understand that it's not behavior charts? And I thought, well, not really. Like, if we can get to stopping that practice a different path, I'm open to it. Because really my goal is to keep everybody, adults included, in the green zone. So when I work from a place of, my goal is for shared understanding, for deeper understanding, and to maintain our relationship so that you will be open and willing to maybe explore or test out or try out. Now we're on a good path. So she said, turn to wonder, turn to inquiry, ask questions. So the path to getting to a change in practice can't happen without a conversation. It also can't happen without me reframing and getting clear on what my goal is. If I stay stuck with my goal, or maybe, my shark music is, you have to understand this is a bad practice, I may not get as far as I want, because this is a bad practice, that might make me feel bad about my practice. And that doesn't help anybody. I go straight into shut down, feeling shame, feeling confused, and all that shark music. Okay? So we're going to, as a coach, as a parent, as a new teacher, even if we're asking ourselves a question, can we approach that with compassion and through connection versus I'm trying to get you to comply with my new directive? And so we have to ask really good questions. So I said, okay, Jen, give me some questions. So I literally wrote them down because I'm not good at this, guys. I just, again, want to walk in the classroom and rip them down. Or I like to lecture, right? Like I like to say, this is not what is working. So she helped me think of a couple of questions. And so whichever scenario you're kind of playing out, you can write these down. I'll put them in the show notes too. And you can play around with them until they become more authentic and more like you. So the first one was Jen's favorite, and I kind of ended up liking it the best too, so I'm going to share it first. She said, invite people to tell you about a time, a day, a minute, an activity where they didn't even remember to use the behavior charts or the clips, and things went really well. So you just say, can you tell me a time, can you remember a time when you guys were caught up in the moment, the activity was going so well that you didn't even have to use the behavior charts, or maybe you even forgot to use the behavior charts? Now you go, why is that a good question? Well, what it does is it definitely focuses on inquiry. It also focuses on a third object. Instead of like just you and your opinions and the other person and their opinions, kind of putting them in a defensive place to defend why they're doing it, you ask them about a time when they had great success. This triggers the positive emotional attractor. It gets us all open to like, oh yeah, I was rocking it. Last week we were doing circle time and it went so well. Or we were in centers and the time just flew by. I didn't even have to think about the behavior charts. I didn't even have to move a clip. And that starts us to go, so we have some strategies here at our fingertips that are helping kids stay in the green zone. How can we capitalize or leverage that? Can we dig through? What was everybody doing? What was different about you that day? And really explore what made that such a success. When we can get that magic, now we can start to say, how can we do this? How can we duplicate it? How can we do it more often without trying to convince that teacher or other adult to stop using the behavior charts, but to rather recognize when kids are in the green zone and what they have control over, which isn't the kids' behavior, but the activity and the choices and the reduction of stressors and their own shark music. So I thought that was a beautiful question that helped us start to think about what is successful without judging or critiquing a practice. And it opens conversation and it gets those kind of good juices flowing. So then the second question, which we both were kind of like, I don't know if this is a really good one or not, but I'm going to offer it just because it's a really good question of inquiry. But you have to have a really strong relationship, and you got to make sure that you aren't sort of just waiting for them to answer and then you're going to judge. Like there has to be this compassion and connection as your primary goal. And that is, can you tell me more about why you use this, whatever it is? So let's say it's behavior charts. Tell me more about that. Jen asked me and I'm like, I don't know. So maybe you guys know. Where did it get started? Who first thought this was a good idea? I mean, I know it's prevalent, but does anybody know sort of like who first made them up? I don't. So I would love to know. So if we can ask that question, I got a little defensive because I heard shark music. Like, I don't know. I don't know where they came from. Pinterest? Teachers pay teachers? I don't know. Like everybody just has one. The dollar store. But there has to be something that traces it back. And so she said, if you can try to get to really understanding, and even that just opens up. So let's say I'm the parent and I ask a teacher, can you tell me more about where this practice comes from? She or he might say, gosh, I don't know. It was in the classroom, or my principal told me I needed to do it, or I learned about it at my university. And so then we can say, well, where do you think they learned about it? And what did they tell you that this was useful for? And they might say, well, in my teaching adolescence class, they said this is really helpful. And I'm like, are we teaching adolescents here, right? In my own mind. But maybe they go, but I'm teaching 3-year-olds or toddlers. So maybe that practice doesn't work. So whatever kind of question you can ask that gets at why are we doing it in the first place? Because remember, J-Lo said to me, Jennifer Lopez said to me, I call her J-Lo, where did this practice come from? And do you know the reasons why people are using it, right? Assume positive intent. Assume it's working for them. Assume that they have a strong reason. And then once we understand that, we can maybe get to that same outcome, but down a different path. Or they might start to become open to say, is there a problem with this? Or maybe there's a problem for this with some of my kids, or my younger kids, or my kids in the afternoon. What could I do differently? And you can start to find that solution together. And then the third question, again, I wrote them down because my brain doesn't hold them well, is another perfect J-Lo one, which is just like, describe for me the perfect day. When do you feel like you are the most effective parent, teacher, therapist, itinerant, whatever it is you are, supervisor? When is it perfect? And just allowing people to say, you know, when we're all like having fun, and when nobody's getting hurt, and when there aren't a bunch of fires I have to put out. And so this is like, I love that too. I love it when I visit your classroom and I'm just like, oh my gosh, these kids are having so much fun, and I don't even want to leave. Like, I don't want to go back to my office. I don't want to go to my next visit. I just want to stay here. Why is that? And same for a parent. They can say, you know, I love that too. I love it when my kid comes home from school and they're like, you know what, Mom? Today we got to do this and that, and it was amazing, and I had so much fun, versus a kid that comes home crying because their clip got moved from green to red, and they have no idea why it moved. And they don't know what to do tomorrow so it doesn't. So how do we go, all right, this is what we both want. And so we together say, okay, this is our dream. I share your dream. And I am here to support you. Whether I'm a parent, whether I'm the co-teacher down the hall, or whether I'm your coach or supervisor, I am so committed to this dream. Let's find a way to achieve it together. Because there's always some fear that if I get rid of the behavior chart, oh my gosh, will I have control? Will there be chaos? Will somebody get hurt? If it's not the behavior chart, it's fill in the blank with whichever practice it is we're holding on to. It's like our security blanket. It's like our binky, right? It's this thing that without it, will I be okay? And so we need somebody, a guide on our side that says, yeah, it's going to be okay. So hopefully that helps you as you think about reframing your own goal. It definitely helps me go, my goal was that everybody would just immediately stop using behavior charts. You would listen to the podcast and you would be like, yes, I'll just not do that anymore. And I'm like, but Jen, I offered solutions, but the solutions are a mindset as well, and they're a process, and they're a buy-in. That our goal was to keep kids in the green zone, and that I have to turn my shark music down long enough that I can believe that I can be successful without the behavior charts. And so the way to a change in practice, thank you to Jennifer Lopez, is through inquiry. It's through wonder. It's through curiosity. And it's not fake curiosity, like, well, you know, why don't you tell me all about that? And why are you doing that? You know, like that face that says, I still think it's like a silly practice and I'm waiting for you to finish so I can tell you what to do instead, right? We have to really come at this, that I want to connect with you, that I want compassion to be our path, and not compliance, not just compliance with my idea that behavior charts aren't a good idea. And so as we turn to wonder whether we're the parent, the coach, the supervisor, the veteran teacher, Jen gave us 3 questions, and I'll put each of those in the show notes, along with a few other blogs and resources, even for some of you who might be interested in this deep dive masterclass that we're offering in 2020 called the Effortless Coach. It's all for those of you who seek a change in practice and want to do that through compassion versus compliance. So that might be of interest as well. So Revolutionaries, thank you so much, whether you're listening to this live with me. I love to see each and every one of you pop up. And if you're listening back, know that I think of you often, and I hope that today's scenery brings you a little bit of peace and renewal so that you can go again in helping to achieve a change of practice through connections and compassion. So have a fabulous weekend, and let me know if you have any questions. And again, I'll put things in the show notes that hopefully help us all approach this bagging of behavior charts in a more compassionate way. Thanks.